and go for it. Okay, hi. Welcome everyone to our Fair Impact implementation workshop, which we called for you, Meet the SoftWare Hash Identifier, do one thing and do it well. It was prepared by my colleague Sabrina Granger and myself. We are both working at the Software Heritage Archive in the INRIA Research Center. And we are very excited to get you working on this particular identifier, the SWHID, which is pronounced like squid. First, some housekeeping rules. Be aware that this session is being recorded, and please add yourself in the list of participants. You have the link in the chat. It is important for us to track who's here. So please do so. It will be very helpful for us in the future. Something else, let's keep the conversation respectful and lively. So please do interact in the chat, in the document. Part of the content creation of this session is you. So thank you for being here and for really participating in this session. The Fair Impact Consortium is a large consortium with many partners. And in this project, which is ending at the end of May 2025, so just in a month, we have been working to expand fair solutions across EOSC. This specific topic of identification and software identification with the SWHID is part of what we call Work Package 3 for the persistent identifiers. And we do have many activities done in other work packages and have a lot of extensions to what already existed in the open science ecosystem. But today we will focus this identifier, and our goals are to give guidance to researchers about software identification, understanding how extrinsic and intrinsic identifiers articulate in the scholarly ecosystem, and if you agree and if you do participate in this content creation, we will be drafting an adoption strategy together so that together as a community, we can drive the adoption of the SWHID, which is not a replacement of existing identifier. It's an additional identifier for some specific use cases that you will discover very soon. Now, we are there in the very soon. But before we start, I'm going to remind you that in the chat, we have the link to the document where you have the full plan of today, and you have a list, an attendee check-in, where we want you to get your name in so we can see who's here and see how many of you are willing to contribute. I'm actually very excited, and I see that many people are here, and I'm very, very happy from your participation. Always give time to do activities, because then people are actually do it. Good, I see you found your way in the document. It's also a way to check that everybody's here on the doc and that we can collaborate. And I will remind you, and take a second for that, that with this big blue button instance, which is a tool to do video calls, most of you have connected only with the headphones, which doesn't allow you to interact. If you want to come back and have the interaction functionality possible, please reconnect. I'm going to give you 30 seconds if you want to reconnect now. I will try to do it also later in another section exchange. So you're not missing anything. 30 seconds to complete your name in the list and reconnect to be interactive. and also to kind of take a breath. It will be a long session. I hope you will all stay with us until the end. We know that some of you are very busy and will leave us before the end, but I'm very happy that you are here and welcoming everyone to this SWHID session. Okay, I think that my 30 seconds are up, and I will do a short recap about research software and the so many PIDs that are out there. What is research software? We have a definition that we have constructed together during the Fair for Research Software elaboration of the principles. This definition divides research software into two parts in the scholarly ecosystem: the research software which is created during the research process or for a research purpose, and software in research that is used for research but is not research software because it's not created for a research purpose. Now, software in general has multiple facets. It can be a tool, it can be the research outcome or result, which is the research software, or it can be the object of research. We can research on a large database of software source code, which is the code, so it can be the object of a full research team doing this research. And in this large landscape, we have also so many PIDs. You know, most of you, all of you know the DOI. There's also the ROR ID, the ORCIDs, Scopus, ISNI, ARC, Research ID, and there's Wikidata entities, and so many more. Why should we need an identifier for software? That's the question that many people ask. And why did we get now a new identifier called the SWHID? And what is the SWHID? So research software identification looks like an investigation, and we are going to investigate this now today in this session, taking care of who needs to be identified. So what are the artifacts and why? What are the use cases that we want to elaborate to use identifiers? When does the software needs to be identified? And globally, what is the SWHID? Houston, we have a problem. There's too many artifacts to identify. And is it easy to identify software? Now, this is the question for you. Is it easy to identify software? Who needs to be identified? Software authorship is extremely varied. The problem with credit and citation is that software has many roles and the software changes over the project lifespan. Software can be the product of a single scholar or a well-defined team, or scattered between teams and between a large scientific community, and even larger than that. Some contribution can come from people that are not even part of the scholarly ecosystem. In addition, software projects themselves may change their names on the fly and change their locations from forge to forge. So who do we need to identify? How do we go there? And where is the software? Again, that's also a very big challenge. There are many different types of places where you have software: package managers, forges, website. This is what we call the code hosting diaspora, discontinued hosting places. And then additionally, we have the institutional forges that are not out of scope. All of these are captured in software heritage with the mission to collect, preserve, and share all software source code. And this is a screenshot from our archive of all the different locations where we do collect software. Now, software is not developed in isolation. It's research software, especially because it depends on a lot of things that are out there. And if you look at Konrad Hinson's software collapse diagram, you see that the project-specific code, which is the research software, is on the top of this stack. Then you have domain-specific tools, scientific infrastructure, non-scientific infrastructure, and operating systems and hardware. So this is a lot of dependencies there. And the development of history is key to understanding the software evolution. Releases matter, also revision, and then the question, how and where do we preserve? We can preserve in software heritage the source code, but we do want also to preserve in scholarly infrastructure some of the research software so it can be more findable. So there are many questions here about where do we put the preserved software and how do we identify the software? And again, another problem, what needs to be identified? There's millions of lines of code. There's a complexity of this web of dependencies, and it is executable knowledge. Now, many people will say, we want just to use the software. We want to keep the software that we run and use it again in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years. But the knowledge, the executable knowledge is in the source code. So the important part in the transparency is also making sure that this is kept safe and accessible and open source. This is something that we preach for at Software Heritage, to have the software source code licensable and open. And now it's your turn. I've talked a lot, maybe too much. And I want to see what you have in mind. So we have the first exercise for you. Let's have a closer look to corresponding use cases. So let's meet in the document. Let's see if you are there already. And you have I'm going to share my screen so that you understand a little bit what I'm going to ask from you. You have 3 columns. The first column is for the stakeholder to answer a use case that you can say clearly, like, as an actor, I can do an action so that, and the reason. And we want you to see which actor do you want to act as. So you choose an actor. We have a developer, a reviewer, an editor, a software user, a research unit director, a data steward, some other, and also some non-specified if you want to use something new. And on the 2 other columns, we have when do I need to identify the software project and when do I need to identify the software itself. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes for this exercise so you can be part of the discussion and not just me blabbing around what's research software and SWHIDs. I'm going to mute myself for this and stop the sharing and come back to you in a second. Always the first exercise is the hardest one. I see that you are asking yourself, what did she say? Okay, so I'm going to try again. We want to see the corresponding use cases. So choose a use case, like the example we had in the first line, which is, as a developer, I need to identify existing software, not to start from scratch. This is something to identify the project. Project is larger than an artifact, a software, which is the source code, maybe a file, maybe an algorithm. I'm kind of giving you ideas here. The reason we want you to go ahead and write things is not to get you have it right or wrong, is to see what you have in mind in your community. So maybe things that we didn't see before. See how you interact with these questions of project and software, which are not the same thing, even though we didn't clarify that. I want to see what do you understand from this. So I'm going to give you a moment. I see that some brave participants are already starting their exercise. It's really nice. I already see some very interesting use cases being shared with projects and even with software artifacts themselves. Another thing I didn't tell you in the housekeeping part is that I like making participants work during the session. So I think this is the way to really understand the topic. So I encourage you to be part and write a use case, even if it's a wrong one. There's no right or wrong answers here. It's not a test. Also, most of you are anonymous on this file, so feel free to just say whatever is in your mind about use cases for identification of software. You can also pick more than one stakeholder. If you know more than one stakeholder that's perfectly fine. You can stick to one as you feel comfortable with. But I'm very happy to see that you are playing the game, and I have many of you are providing use cases, a lot about citation, some about reproducibility, checking results, checking compliance, about findability, how to find software, not reinventing the wheel, and see how this wheel works in the supply chain. Findability again, yes. Checking if there's a stable release. The releases are a question here. See that some are still writing, that I don't want to interrupt you in the writing process. So those of you who have completed their part, you can then see the other use cases. You're free to comment each other if you want to in the document. I'm going to leave a last minute to finalize what's there, and we will move on to the next part. Okay, good. I'm very happy from all the use cases. Actually, this is very useful for us, and I'm very grateful that you are doing that. So let's discover the SoftWare Hash Identifier, and how does this identifier change the game for describing, referencing, and even citing software. Now, we can say that describing and referencing software are two different things, right? Because describing the software is more about the metadata and identifying the metadata record. And this is something that you can do with a registry, a DOI, or another extrinsic identifier. Now, referencing is about the source code itself and what exactly is the specific thing, the specific software that we want to reference, that it's used in an article or that is part of a larger project. And here you can see the example with a person. A person, well, the metadata record can be in, like here in Wikidata. And then what is the comparison with an intrinsic identifier? It is maybe a fingerprint. We are calling the SoftWare Hash Identifier the fingerprint of the software. And when we look at those two types of identifiers, intrinsic and extrinsic, we do have royal weddings. And an example for that is this one with the Image Processing Online journal. We have it with HAL, we have it with Zenodo, and there is the possibility to have one identifier for this metadata record, which is identifying here the article DOI, and the SWHID, the actual code that is referenced with this article. So this is in a publisher workflow where you have the article with a DOI and the SWHID, which is deposited in SoftWare Heritage, and where we can show you how this connection is actually done. So I'm not sure that I'm going to do that now, unless if someone here has some question about this differentiation, about the extrinsic and intrinsic identifiers. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. Yeah, in the chat, it's the most efficient way to ask questions. And there's a comment from Boris about the fingerprint and intrinsic to describe the SWHID. What would be the DNA? Yes, a DNA sequence is also intrinsic to a person. It's a good remark. I'm going to continue and explain a bit about the SWHID, so you see how actually it's so close to the artifact itself. Generating a SWHID is like ABC. Maybe now I'm going to show you a little bit how it's done on the SoftWare Heritage side. Any end user can generate a SWHID. You don't need to have an account on SoftWare Heritage. You don't need to be the software author of the software package, of the repository. It is really a plug and play service. And to do so, I'm going to share the screen with the example that Sabrina has put in the chat. So what do you see here? You see a DOI, because when you go here, I'm going to share this. You are on the page of the article. This is an article called Image in Painting Using Patch Consensus and DCT Priors. I never read this article. Apologies to Pablo. And here are here is the identifier, the SWHID that you can find in this box, where you have a full SWHID to reference the software. So I'm going to go back to my directory in SoftWare Heritage and show you where do you get this SWHID. You can get this SWHID in this permalinks box. And if you navigate into this folder, you have all the other files, all the files that are included in the folder. You have a generated README. You can then choose some scripts or some code to identify if you want to identify a specific file. Let me see.
Moran, you have a question in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Sabrina. So let me read the question out loud. Does SWHID for software change with each release of the software, so we have all lineage of it? Exactly. A SWHID is intrinsically bound to the content, like a DNA sequence more than a fingerprint. So every time it changes, well, the DNA doesn't change, but every time, because the software is not a human being, but every time we have a change in the code, a change in any file, the full computation will take place, and we have a SWHID of this new object which has different files in it, even if it's one file. I see that many people are writing, so maybe I'll wait a bit for the questions that will come up. So to go more in depth into your question, Priyanka, if we look at, so here it's a deposit, so it will be more difficult to see that. But when we have an identifier where I can have a button here called history, I can go into the history here. It's a deposit from IPO, and IPO will have only this one version that was submitted into SoftWare Heritage with this example. I see, Joy, you have a question. Does the SWHID identify the folder as a collection or just the granular level? If the latter, can SWHIDs be related? That's a really good question. We will talk about that, as Sabrina says in some of the other slides. So let's wait for that. But this is a great question. I will answer it by the end of the session. Thanks for asking that. If a software is a version controlled on a GitLab repository and a mirror hosted on GitHub, will the software have two separate SWHIDs? Haha, that's also a very, very good question, Kelvin. The content itself will have the same SWHID, so I will have the same SoftWare Hash Identifier for the directory if it's the same content, and if nothing changed between the two. Of course, it's mirrored, so it's the same content, but the context of this SWHID will change, and you will soon understand what I mean when I say the context, because a SWHID is a complex object where you have the hash of the specific type of software artifact, and then you can add parameters as context. So one will have the origin of a GitHub repository, and the other will have the origin of a GitLab repository. And we are doing, so for the relationships between SWHIDs, we have a very elaborate data model where it's more top-down, so you get from the top to the bottom. But there's work that is in progress now, not available on SoftWare Heritage as a service, but we do work to have from the bottom to upwards. So when we have the same directory, which is the same SWHID, so it will be saved one time in SoftWare Heritage, we could see that it has this many connections, so the mirror in GitHub and the mirror in GitLab. I hope that with the explanation on the contextual parameters, this will be clearer. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and we'll move forward so I can get to the slides that are interesting for these questions. And if you have other questions, continue putting that in the chat, and I will answer all the questions by the end of the session. I do think we will have time. I hope so. Sabrina, I hope we will have time for all the questions. Okay, so next slide. The SWHID in action, minting a source code fragment. So this is a different type of SWHID because we're going into a file, and in the file we are picking lines. So this is to identify an algorithm. This can be very useful for programming courses at the university. So a professor wants to identify a particular function or algorithm in a project, in a software project, using this SWHID, identifying the content file. So this is the CNT SWHID, and adding this context, which adds the line, is really useful for this use case, and is possible very easily in SoftWare Heritage. If I have time, I will show you that later when I will demo a bit in the archive itself. And this is actually a good time to go and do that with a peek under the hood of these intrinsic identifiers. So first, I need you to go and test those two identifiers that we have prepared for you. Both of these identifiers, if you see it closely in this slide, are actually with the same hash, D27FF2F9. Same. But one is long and one is short. Now, if you see the end of this long one, you see that's a license.txt. That's the name of the path. So it's actually a license file. And we have a lot of license files in SoftWare Heritage because a lot of software comes with a license file. This is a good practice. So a recommendation to put a license file in your software. And this license file will be the same file, if it's the same used license, will be then linked into the different directories where it's available. And the hash will be the same. If we change text in this file, the file hash, so this hash will change. And now the exercise, so again, let's get back to the exercise. I'll explain something. What is your take on these two different identifiers? Are there different identifiers? Do you see the difference? What is this difference? I'm going to give you a few minutes to write down your conclusion. So some of you can be brave and join us with live and speaking, knowing that this is recorded and will be on YouTube soon. So pick your way to contribute. You can write it down in the conclusion part or in the chat or just say it out loud. I'm going to give you, 10 minutes, a bit less.
And we'll have a question by Melvin, please.
Aha, I see a question, right. Since SWHID changes as the content changes, but what happens if we have a file folder content which didn't change, while other things are changing? Will this particular content not changing keep the initial ID, or will it also change? If so, how to keep track? Excellent question. The things that don't change will stay the same with the same SWHID. And actually, and I don't have a slide to explain that in this slide deck, but this is a Merkle DAG graph, which might sound like Chinese, or another language, which means that the portion of the graph, so the artifacts inside this graph that didn't change, will keep the original, will keep the hash. And actually, the construction of the upper hash will be a computation of the lower hashes in the graph. I hope that sounds relatively clear. Maybe with the pyramid it's clearer, but what I can show you, let's see if I can find something to show you. Continue with the exercise. I will see if I have something to show you to explain what I was just saying. So again, the exercise was to see what's the difference and what's your opinion and thoughts about the two different SWHIDs, one with context and the other without. Would you consider this the same artifact? And why would you need two different SWHIDs? What would be the use cases? And just after we've concluded this exercise, I will show you something to answer Melvin's question. Thanks for asking that. And since I think that we have some new arrivals because the list looks longer than before, I'm not sure. Remember to check into the note document where we have a check-in list of attendance. Thank you. I see some brave participants writing conclusions. Some are still looking for kind of find the differences. Look on this one and that one and what's the differences. Feel free also to comment. I don't see the difference. That's not clear. That's completely fine. Also, this is really helpful for us to know these things so we can adapt our way of explaining. Or maybe even the way it's shown on the archive interface. Not promising anything, but this would be very helpful to have some comments and feedback from you users, because you are users. Maybe more than that. I see another question. So first I'm going to comment to say that for Melvin, I will answer the question with an example after the 2 next slides. So first I will do 2 slides and I will answer your question with an example. And Boris, you asked, according to you, do we have the same level of information with these 2 SWHIDs? You're answering my question, yes. The shortest version is sufficient to find the complete and long one. And A2, no, you can have a common hash for a part of the SWHID, and following is a differentiation completion part. So let's open them and see. Let me open them somewhere and get you to see that live. Also, because since it's recorded, people might be useful for them to see that. So what I'm showing here is the first one, where you have a lot of things shown before the text, the license.txt here. The hash is a hash of this content. That's it. This license.txt does not live in this hash. Just this content is hashed into the CNT identifier. Now, you can see that if I share this one, where you can actually just see the content, you even can't see the name of the file. Do you know why? Because the file doesn't know its name. The name is the relation in the folder. So I have a folder with many files. Each file has a name. So the folder has this information, which name has which content, which SWHID, but the SWHID, the content itself, it doesn't know who is, what it is. So here you really see the raw file, and you can click on this raw file button, and you will see a URL with /raw, and there will be only the content, and you have also the possibility to download. And then on the side here, you will have only this SWHID in your permalink box. And if you see, you have a citation here, but I will talk about it at the end of the session if we have time. Okay. In this box, since we are here, you have many different functionalities. One is to copy the identifier, just the identifier as it is here. Copy the permalink, so it has a resolver before the identifier. And you have also this iframe embedding, proposing a possibility to put on your website somewhere an iframe that will show the content that's in Software Heritage. And actually, in the Episciences platform and in Hub, you have iframes of the content that's deposited or referenced in Software Heritage. So this is something to know that exists. I'm going to stop that, go back to our, let's do that. And I'll move to the next two, next two slides. Yeah, the next two slides will explain. This next slide will explain actually how it's created this this contextual SWHID. So, what do we have here? What is a SWHID made of? So first, it's made of a prefix, which is SWH. Long history is that SWHIDs were once software heritage identifiers, but now there are software hash identifier because you don't need software heritage to compute a SWHID. Then you have a schema version, which is actually the hash computation method to get your SWHID. So if we have one, now it's for the SHA-1 method, which can change if we have, this is very technical, if there's SHA-1 collisions, we might want to evolve the schema version, and we will have a SWH with the number 2, with a stronger hash function. That doesn't mean that the hashes before will not work. They will always work. It will always be the content. But to make this stronger, there will be this way forward, so we're not blocked by this hash, and all hashes will be mapped and recomputed. Then you have this object type, and you have different types here available. We talked about the content, the CNT. We have the directory with the IR, and this is the one that we are recommending using in academia, because this is the actual SWHID that's reproducible and doesn't depend on external infrastructure like Software Heritage. So you can compute it on your machine very easily. Then you have the revision, which is a commit in a development history sequence. And a release is actually very similar to a revision, but it's a tagged release with a note, and is very specific, well, shows that this specific item target is a release. Finally, you have the largest object, which is the snapshot, SNP, which gives you actually really a snapshot, like a picture of a Git repository or another point in. It's really a point in time where we saw this repository or this package manager, this package, and all the branches, all the releases that are available at this point in time. So these are the objects here. Then you have the possibility to add contexts, as we said with the mirrors, the origin contexts, giving the where did it came from, origin, URL, the visit context, which is the snapshot. So it's for a snapshot, SWHID, you won't have twice the same thing. It will be short. A snapshot would be only the SWHID, the hash, and the origin. But when you are lower in the graph, you want to know which visit. In which visit did you see this directory? Did you see this contact? This will be the visit. Then you have an anchor SWHID, which will be a revision, which is one of the items in the graph that what is the exact path in the graph, and it concludes with also the path in the directory. So maybe if it's a file which is lower in a subdirectory like here, you will have the complete file with the name of the file. And finally, if this is a SWHID of an algorithm, and you can see that here the algorithm of the piece of code, the code fragment, is available on these lines. So this is a SWHID. Now, I've said that, and I'm going to show you a pyramid. Ta-da! A pyramid where you can find the SWHID object in the lower part of this pyramid. What is this pyramid? This is a pyramid that we have produced in 2020 as part of the Research Data Alliance and 4C11 joint working group software source code identification. We have analyzed a lot of identifiers in this report, so it's a large report, and identified that some objects, some granularity levels require an intrinsic identifier, and other granularity levels are not digital objects and do not require an intrinsic identifier. On the contrary, they require an extrinsic identifier. And this we can see from granularity level 1 to granularity level 10, where 10 is the bottom of the pyramid. We have the most items, like a lot of code fragments. Then files, then directories, commits, which are revisions, releases, we have fewer of that, and snapshots, again, fewer elements. And then we arrive at the top level of extrinsic identifier, and here I will read it from top to GL4, because we can have a project and we can have project versions. This can happen. It's not a software version, but a project version. And the example I always use with the project version is Python 2 and Python 3. It's not the same thing. It's not, Python is the project, but you have Python 2 and Python 3. But Python 3 is not a specific version, like a specific release. There are many releases and many versions in Python 3, and many versions and many releases in Python 2. But in terms of, if you want to describe it in a kind of a knowledgeable way, there's the project version. Then you have modules. Some projects, not all projects, but some projects are divided in modules. For example, software heritage source code is actually made of modules. You have, I don't have the number, but more than 20 modules that are actually the software source code base. Then you have submodules. This is another concept of modules. Now, for each module, you can have submodules, and then you can have different snapshots of this module. So very complex to understand, complex to identify. It all depends on what do you want to reference and for what. And among these, you have the question of reproducibility. What is reproducible? So of course, an extrinsic identifier, a DOI, will not help with reproducibility, especially if you don't have access to the digital artifacts. So you want to count on intrinsic identifier for reproducibility, and for those who won't be lost if infrastructures cease to exist. So I know this is sad to say, but we don't know what the future will hold. We do hope that software heritage is here forever, but might not be. We need resilient strategy, and these intrinsic identifier that can be computed everywhere on every machine is this strategy. So this is a long explanation, a bit depressing, but we got there. If we have some question about this, just hold for a second, because I'm going to go deeper into the rabbit hole with, I hope that Sabrina will not kill me, with this diagram. Okay, I will put that in the chat to tell you where it came from. Why am I showing you this? This is the complete software heritage workflow, and it was to answer Melvin's question. What happens in software heritage is we have two operations. One, listing all the software that's out there, and the other one that's loading all the software out there with a specific type of tool that's called a loader. But we need a different loader for each type of location that we are crawling and getting software from, because a Git loader is different from a Mercurial loader, from a Debian source package loader, and all of that comes to just one gigantic Merkle DAG, which is the graph linking origins at the top into snapshots. So an origin can have a snapshot, and then into a release, a revision at the directory, which has a subdirectory, which has two contents. So for example, in my snapshot, I've added a new branch. I have one branch, so the branches are not listed here. But let's say I added a new revision. The new revision will show the last revision in this snapshot, but everything that comes from this last revision will stay the same. The same SWHIDs will be computed. It's computed from the content to the directory to the revision, and just the new items will have their own hash, but everything that was before will stay with the previous hash. The thing is that if there's a top layer that came and is with new content, so for example a new snapshot, the snapshot itself will have the hash of the snapshot. In the snapshot, we have two branches, one with the previous content and the one with the actual new content. Each one will have a specific hash for calculated and computed from the content itself. So I hope that I didn't lost you with this with this diagram, and this is not too technical, but this is how it works in software heritage, and this is why the SWHID works, because we are not duplicating the content. We are creating new links when new things arrive. So for example, a license file, as you saw before in the exercise, the license file could be linked into many different origins and directories, because the same content, the same hash has been seen and seen in those 3,000 repositories. We will not have 3,000 license files. This strategy make it more efficient archival, so we don't duplicate things. We don't have the same copy one next to the other. And it's a very good strategy for resilience and integrity. Now, I'm going to stop, get back here, and give you some work to do. I hope. If you have questions, don't hesitate. I don't see if I had questions before. I'm I'm not sure, but I'm going to ask you some questions. So brace yourself. Questions are coming. For the first one, with the example of this SWHID, what happened to the landing page? Usually, I click on the persistent identifier link. The solver will lead to a landing page, but there is no metadata on the software heritage landing page. What's your take on this? So we talked about extrinsic identifier, intrinsic identifier, the workflow of software heritage. Now we know that in the scholarly ecosystem, we expect to have a metadata record showing things in a certain way. So what is your take on this question of a landing page? I'm going to mute myself. I know it's 3:03 and some of you are very busy and need to go, and I appreciate all of you who are here and continue this exercise, because this exercise are the way to understand the SWHID and then use the SWHID and communicate it better into your community. So please go into the exercise. I'm going to show the exercise, and this is it's not in an exercise. Sorry, Sabrina. This is my fault. So you open your mic or you put in the chat. We stay on the slides. This is very important because this is a way not to lose you on the document itself. So please, if someone wants to give their opinion or write something in the chat, I'd be very happy with that. I can also open the link and show you what we see on this link. We see this. So what's your take on this? Here I'm seeing as a .zenodo.json file. This I know. What I know that I can do from here is I can go up. Let me see. I'm on the code, I'm on a file, I've clicked on code, I have my directories, as you see with these little icons. I have my files. I'm very happy because I have a code method.json file. Let's see if I have a citation.cff. I do not have a citation.cff, so the code meta file will be the one used for this citation box. So this is kind of new stuff to tell you. We can go to the origin link. So if we go to the origin link, we are back on the same track with the directory. We can go outside, go to origin and see what's happening in GitHub. So this is how it's in GitHub. So very similar, but not quite the same because this is an archives and GitHub is a collaborative forge where development is happening. And GitHub is not meant to be an archive, and things might change. Some forges have closed their doors. I see some comments from Sabrina in the chat. Some clues, because we're investigating. What did we see? So we saw we were on this file. We saw some of the revision, about the revision. We were in a directory. So if we do take the permalink, we see this. So we have the hash itself of the content, the origin where it was. So I've shown you how it looks on GitHub. Luckily, it's still there. Some people are deleting software, so it happens. Snapshot is the specific snapshot. This we have found this file, and the revision, which is the anchor, and finally the path. The path was the root directory and this file name. Okay, let's see if someone is having some information for us. But going back to the citation addition, which is a new addition, is that when you are on this file, you can generate a citation in BibTeX format using the code fragment type, because we are on a file. If we are on the directory, we can use software or software version. And this is nice. You can copy the citation, and this is generated not from the repository, but from the code meta.json file that's here. This is why it's generated. And it also happens with citation.cff. If I'm here and I open the citation, I will have a software version with the dear SWHID that you have heard about and you like so much because it allows reproducibility. This is the one we are recommending. Again, depending on the use case, but in general, in academia, this is the recommended SWHID. And we have 2 pages about that. One, which is a more general explanation of software heritage in academia, and the other one is how to use reference and archive and cite in software heritage. Very easy. So, for example, something that, since I see that I kind of talk to myself here, I will show you another thing that's really nice in software heritage is the save code now. No need to be the author of the software. If the software is public and available, you put the origin URL, so a Git repository, or any one of these other options. So Git for Git, AG for Mercurial, SVN for Subversion, CVS for CVS, BZR for Bazaar, and Tarball for Tarball, so actually zips that you can find on web pages. All of this you can put the URL, submit, and it will be saved. I'm not going to test live, but you can see here the list of all the requests that are pending at the moment or succeeded just a few seconds ago. And if you have your code and you see that it's not in software heritage, you can go and do it directly. There are also other options on how to save again if the code is already there but not updated. Okay, so I'm going to stop the mumbling and go back to the help desk questions. I see someone is writing. Feel free also to interact and talk to me if you want to. You don't have to just write, as you wish. I see that you have only the headphones, so. But what I can say about the question, it's a tricky question. Metadata is a tricky thing as well. So you saw it in the JSON file, but also in the code meta file, there is metadata. We are capturing intrinsic metadata. We want to have all metadata as well. We're not providing a metadata record at this stage at Software Heritage because we are an archive of source code and we want to do one thing and do it well. Archive all source code with all development history. I'm going to move to the next question and keep writing. Your thoughts are precious, so please don't hesitate on writing things in the chat. The next help desk activity is, should I identify my datasets with a SWHID? I know that many people here are working with data, so maybe you have already answers for us. Do people ask you this question? Should they use SWHIDs for datasets? And again, this is not in the document, it's here. Okay, Melvin, question. Can SWHIDs enable tracking the source code of the repos in case of code is generated from generative AI tools? That's a very interesting one. So this could be, well, at the time, we have thought of producing a plagiat, which is a plagiarism functionality to check if the code is the most recent excerpt of this code, which might be related to your question. But for now, we don't have this functionality. We might have things that are in this context, in this direction. But for now, we cannot identify the code that's not generated by a human and generated by an AI tool. It can be a topic. So it's an interesting topic to see, since we have all the source code, since we have all the version and all the development history, it could be interesting to have this research on software heritage. But there's so many topics that are researched on software heritage, like programming languages, what's the when is programming language has appeared first, what's the percentage of each programming language, for example. That's a research that is has happened and was presented yesterday in a conference. This kind of research is not done yet. But a good topic to do. Any questions or answers or comments about the should I identify my datasets with a SWHID? I know a lot of information. I'm sorry, that's a lot to take in, but I'm happy that you've stayed and you are listening. I hope so. You are listening, because I think that we are creating something very interesting here with this discussion and with the questions that you're bringing in. So continue. It's very helpful for us. I hope it's helpful for you too. So we have a comment from Tristan that not to recommend use the SWHID to identify datasets. And I encourage this recommendation because SWHIDs are for software. People say that now that we use GitHub or other forges for objects that are not software, this is true, and it will be archived in software heritage. Doesn't mean that it's the appropriate SWHID, but it's a complex question, because sometimes the data and the software are intrinsically related. So do we identify separately a data set from the software? I would suggest yes, like identifying separately an article from a software or an article from a data set. Sometimes it's just sample data for a software, like test data. So does this require some archival more than just the fact that it's in the source code folder? I'm not sure. So it really depends on the use case. But these are questions that we need to ask ourselves and provide the recommendation as institutions and as research organizations or infrastructure. Do we accept certain artifacts or not? And we are trying to create a community-driven vision where different infrastructure are related to one another, interoperable, with CodeMeta for metadata, but it's not the topic of the day, and with the SWHID as the identifier of the artifacts, accepting extrinsic identifier from all different infrastructures, because there are really different things out there. I'm going to move to the next question or next slide, but continue writing there. I'm going to move as well to generate the most accurate SWHID, the concepts behind the buttons. So you saw some things already. And the question that we want to clarify is, what is a branch? What is a visit? And if you want to open your mic or just answer in the chat or kind of comment, providing a definition to a branch, to a visit. Looking forward to what we've discussed about snapshots. And here is actually the definition of a snapshot in the SWHID specifications, which is a snapshot of a given software origin records, all entry points found there and where each of them was pointing at the time. So this is the definition of a snapshot. Now, related to a snapshot is actually a point in time. So this is the visit where I captured, where Software Heritage captured with all the different releases, all the different branches. So what is a branch and how do we find a branch? This is something I can show you in somewhere. Let me get somewhere. It's interesting here. Sorry. I'm going to get to the place where I want to show. Here we are with this repository and origin. This is with the snapshot icon, the last snapshot date, which is February 16th, February 2025. Now I'm going to share this and see with this icon that I have here. It's a green one, which says that we have good news. The archive is up to date. The last visit was on February 16, but nothing was updated since. So we have the most recent copy. So I'm coming back to my archive place and looking at my visits here. What is that? This is not the development history, even though we have history. It says the visiting history. How many times have Software Heritage came to this repository starting 2020, and how many visits? So the graph here is not about the number of content of objects that were ingested, but the number of visits. So here in 2021, we were full of visits. And here in 2024, 0 visits, very particular. And here in 2075, a visit in February. And I imagine since no modification was made, maybe some checking was happening, but no loading. So we don't need to capture that as a new visit. And in this snapshot, we captured the branch head, which is the master branch. This is the same. And another tag, which is 1.5.0. Some repository will have a development branch or very nice feature X branch. And this is visible here. And you can visit the other branch in this repository. Any question? Branch, basically separate version of the main origin. Visit can be any origin, anytime. How it's different from snapshot? That's a good question. A snapshot contains all the branches. All branches are identified, are captured in a snapshot. So when you have an identifier of a snapshot, you have the complete development history of all the branches with all the visits. So you came to one visit, you won't have the future visit because it's a snapshot of this time, point in time. You have all the past visits and all the contained branches and content. Now, if you want to identify something in a separate branch, you can't identify the branch, but you can identify a directory in this branch which will contain, so if I'm going to get back, and I actually never tested it, so let's be very very nice with Moran now. Does this work? So what do we have here? We do have the visit, we do have the anchor, and actually we don't have the path to the specific branch, but this will show this point in. So if I'm going to give you, I don't know if this is what Sabrina posted, if I give you that, you get the same place where I am. But it doesn't give you the information that you're on a separate branch. This is something that we need to note. But it's getting more and more complex. Why do we need to specifically identify a branch? What would be the use case for that? Should that be something that we have in the SWHID or not? I'm not sure. Okay. I'm going to go back here and then go here, because we're going to try and travel with the concept of releases. What is a release and what is the software heritage definition of a release? So you might find and be disappointed, but you shouldn't, that we don't have the same releases as a GitHub repository. It's not the fact, the truth. The truth is we use a different way to identify releases, and GitHub accepts all tags that are just happening in GitHub, and we have chosen a different way in the data model so that releases are specific releases used in this context. I know this might not sound as clear as I say it, because it's hard to explain, but it's when using a git tag -a is what happens behind the scenes. The fork, that's a good question. Can we identify a fork? At the beginning of Software Heritage, we couldn't identify a fork, but I think that currently it's possible, but it's not visible on the interface. So I don't have a mechanism to show you how to use the interface to show forks, but I do know that in terms of data that's collected, we do collect this data of forks. Good question. So what is a fork for those who do not know forks? We have a GitHub repository, and many people might want to contribute to this repository, sometimes 500 people, sometimes more. There's people, actually people that just fork to have a copy of the code to themselves without wanting to contribute to it. This is a mechanism to contribute to open source, and which means that the original repository is not the forked one. The forked one is just a copy. It doesn't necessarily is for someone. The fork is not a person that holds the rights to this repository, so it's just a copy. And it's a good remark to see if this is possible to see, am I on a fork on Software Heritage? At the moment on the interface, this is not visible. I'm looking at your comments, Sabrina. You're just commenting what I'm saying. Good. I'm going to move to the next slide. More policy slide, strategic slide. And the next one, it's about the impact of the SWHID on the ecosystem. I agree. Sorry, I'm going to read Christine's comment. Would it be interesting to trace the history of the code when starting from a fork? Yes, sometimes an important project started on an original repository and then moved to a fork. And we can see this transition, well, in SoftWare Heritage, but we can see it also in GitHub when it's in GitHub, that the main development is happening somewhere else than in the original location. And there's different reasons why it can happen, and it would be very interesting to research it. But in general, it would be very interesting to have this information. Is this a fork? And what it was forked from. But good discussion. I have a kind of a shopping list for my dev team. And I'm going to continue with this impact strategic. Yes, and even if I'm looking at that, there's some feedback that will arrive in the chat, but I will move on. Adopting a new PID is not only a technical stake, and I will read this quote. The technology acceptance model describes perceived usefulness as one of the main variables that determine the acceptance of new technologies. In the PID ecosystem, if a new identifier is not perceived as useful by the target user community, there will be a real problem of acceptance and uptake, even if the same identifier is considered as necessary by PID service providers. This means that adoption is crucial. And what I can say about the SWHID is that it is adopted by many infrastructures, by researchers, by other peer providers that link and resolve software. And now, just a few days ago, it was also accepted and published as an ISO standard. So, as you may know, ISO is a closed proprietary publication that you can buy, but since we are all working in open source and we are all very open, everything is available on this link here, swhid.org. You have the specification and the actual 1.2 version, which is the ISO standard version, which is completely okay and fine to do so. So if you want the content from how we compute hashes and what's the specification, you go there and you have all the content. But it is a standard and it's really important because this is useful for industry, not only for academia. Also something that we didn't say, that SWHIDs, here we're talking about SWHIDs in academia, but SWHIDs are really important in industry. Not for the same use cases, but very important and used. Now, last activity for those of you who stayed with me until the very end. And thank you for being here. I'm going to ask you for this last activity to reflect on your journey in the SWHID adoption boat. You are a SWHID steward on this boat, and you are going to meet me in this file and see what we've prepared for you, especially Sabrina, which was a big help to give you all of this precious information. So, the activity. You need to pick a situation number on the boat. So if you didn't look at the boat is here, and each person has a number. It's a situation number. You don't need to copy the actual visual. You can just copy just a number, like number 13. Why did you select this situation? What does it tell about your community? It can illustrate a past situation as well as the present or even the future situation, like plans or doubts in the future. Please share with us. We will be very grateful. What could be the next step for this given situation? What action can you do in your community to get this adoption so that we build together an interoperable ecosystem where the specific, very peculiar way of software is identified as it needs to be. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes. You can use this time to do the activity and think of all the questions that you might have, because you have me until 4, and I promise to answer all the questions if we have time. So this is the time to ask me anything. I know some of you had to leave, and maybe you will watch the video later, but those of you who are here full force, I very appreciate that. Do the activity and insert the questions in the chat if you want me to answer something. And I'm not sure if I lost track of past questions, because sometimes there's a lot of information moving on. So to do the activity, I'm going to give you some silence from my voice. I am very happy that you're still here with me. Any question on SWHIDs, on software heritage, on other functionalities? I can show what we have now. I see that you still think of your next step. So I'm going to move back to the boat and give you 5 minutes more to complete your action, and leave you time to put an answer here, or a question. Answer and a question. An answer for the boat, a question for Moran. Thank you, Tristan, for your questions. So the question is, are the SWHID's intrinsic identifiers meant to be used independent of the Software Heritage Archive, or to always be the reference with the Software Heritage Archive as a kind of registration authority? Okay, so SWHIDs can be computed locally, and they will have the same, it will be the SWHID that will be given or will be computed by Software Heritage. It will be the same SWHID if it's the same content. The risk is that with some transformation, it won't be the same content. But normally, if it's directory or content on a file, it's easier to make sure that this is the same object and will be computed locally or in Software Heritage with the same computational method. So decentralized not requires Software Heritage. This is different for a snapshot SWHID, which depends on Software Heritage because it's about the fact that Software Heritage visited a repository or a package in a package manager. The visit itself is computed in the SWHID, so it will be impossible to recompute the same snapshot and have it outside of Software Heritage. Now, Software Heritage is also a mirror network where other infrastructure that are Software Heritage mirror contain all the Software Heritage data and can resolve on their infrastructure. They can resolve SWHIDs from top to bottom, including snapshots, because they are mirroring the Software Heritage Archive. So if today a snapshot, a SWHID was generated in Software Heritage and then copied in the Enea mirror in Italy or the GRNet mirror in Greece, because there's two mirrors that are operational. If something happens to the Software Heritage location, these SWHIDs will still be alive on those infrastructure. Now, in a more doomsday scenario where all infrastructure are down, there's no Software Heritage, no GRNet mirror, no Enea mirror, nothing, nada, zlich, no ORCID, no DOIs, nothing, you still can compute a SWHID on your machine and ask everyone that still has a machine, and if there's still electricity, can you compute this? Because I really need this particular item, this particular artifact. This will be possible using the directory SWHID, trying to find this item. That's the doomsday scenario. Resilience to the end, very robust. And Sabrina has put in the chat the link to the command line tool. You can have fun and play with it. You can really compute it on your machine if you have your hash method, which is open source and online, of course. So you can have your calculate and compute your own SWHIDs. So the less nice side of it, if it's not yet on Software Heritage because it's on your local machine, but nowhere else, it will happen to be a 404 error because we don't have it yet. But this should be changed. I do want to have another message saying we don't have it yet, and not just an error. Today it's an error. I would like to encourage smaller community registries. This is the vision behind the. Oh, so sorry, because I don't think that the question will be captured in the video. So I'm going to share Tristan's question. Is the vision behind this ecosystem to focus on centralized mega registries like Software Heritage with mirrors, or are you encouraging smaller community registries of software using SWHIDs? So it's both. We want to have this infrastructure living with a decentralized mechanism, with each mirror operating autonomously but following certain principles. So this is for the mega infrastructures. For the SWHID itself, the fact that the SWHID name changed from software heritage identifier to software hash identifier is to disconnect the identifier from the infrastructures and leave it to the communities decide if they want to adopt the SWHID, even if it's not in software. It's comfortable to have it in software because then it resolves to the software heritage archive. But if you compute it locally and you have your own infrastructure, something that might not be clear from all the rest of the things that I've said, because I didn't stress it out. Software heritage is open source. If you want to build your own software heritage on your machine or on your servers, you can, and you can compute SWHIDs and have your SWHIDs with your domain, and it won't be a mirror, so it won't mirror all that's already in software heritage, which is a very complex and heavy thing to do, but you can have your own software instance archive. Open source, everything you can do. There's an easy documentation on getting started and running your machine, your archive, and having safe code now into your instance, and having the SWHID on your instance. It won't have all the SWHIDs out there. It won't be able to resolve the rest of the SWHIDs, but whatever you have saved, it can. So it's both visions. Strengthening the ecosystem with strong open infrastructure and having an open source project code that can be done, used in a specific institution and community. I think that most of you have concluded the exercise, and I'm going to stop sharing and move to the end because the end is near. Even though you still have me for 15 minutes, so continue with the questions, I am still here. But I want to take a minute because I really want to thank you all for taking the time and being here. Take the time to share these links with you, the SWHID, the newsletter, our LinkedIn page, because we have a lot of information coming from this page. Also tell you that we have an ambassadors program if you want to join us in advocating for software and SWHIDs in your communities. That's something that's possible by being part of this volunteer network, by applying to it. So we are welcoming people as software heritage ambassadors. We also have other programs to provide support to the archive and get some nice VIP perks with the archives and libraries membership program. I'm going to put, no, I don't need to put anything in the chat because Sabrina has done this already. But I'm going to continue thanking you and leave this room open with your questions and remarks and feedback. If you want to say anything before you leave, if you want to just leave, I'm very grateful for the fact that you stayed with us until the end. And I'm going to keep recording in the next 5 minutes, and then I will stop the recording. Thank you very much. I'm actually looking at all the beautiful answers that you've put in the last exercise. Really looking forward to see how we collaborate and work together. Thank you. No last questions. Thank you all. You're very nice saying that it was well prepared and for the nice comments that you have. But if you have questions, I'm still here. Me and Sabrina, we have locked our calendars until 4, and we are here for you. So Tristan, yes, if I publish a data set that was generated with a release of some software package and I want to cite that software with a SWHID, should I include in that citation the URL of a registry archive that I know includes the SWHID, or should just including the SWHID be sufficient? In other words, how do I use a SWHID in a software citation? Okay, let's unpack the question. You want to use a SWHID in a citation. Usually, it's better not to put the SWHID in the content itself, because just putting the SWHID in the content itself will change the SWHID. So it's a race condition. So let's put the SWHID aside. The SWHID is not part of the content. Then what you can do for citing software directly in Software Heritage, this is by using a codemeta.json file or a citation.cff file that will help you. I will share my screen. Let's see if it's the right one. Yes, up. Do you see my screen? I think you do. So what I'm sharing here is a repository that we use during this activity. And you can see that here we have a citation BibTeX. Today, we only have a BibTeX format. Hopefully, in the near future, not very near, but let's say in a year or two, we have other formats. Here we have the SWHID of this directory added on the fly when generating this citation. It is not in the code meta itself. So you look in the code meta, I have a lot of things, the people, authors, the related links, some programming languages, a lot of things, very important. I do love code meta. And then the SWHID will be of this. So here I'm on the content. So here I will see the SWHID of the content file, which is not the one I want. I want to identify the directory. This is the one I want, where I was before. So this is what I would suggest, having a codemeta.json file or a citation. Both are useful on Software Heritage. I prefer codemeta because you have more metadata available on a codemeta file than on a citation CFF. But it's and there's a difference. Codemeta is to describe code, while citation CFF is about identifying what to cite. So you can actually use in the citation CFF your article, a manual, or something else, and the citation will be the one that you've chosen with the citation.cff. Okay, so this is something to have in mind. I hope this answered the question. Now, we do have a research software metadata guidelines also produced with Fair Impact, with the Fair Impact project and partners. And I know that Sabrina will put some link inside to put you in these guidelines. These are really guidelines for researchers. What should they do? Where should they put their software? Where should they put the metadata? What should they describe? Again, don't put your SWHID in the content. Put everything else. Put your README, put your authors, put your license, very important, the license, and also put your code meta.json file or citation file, but don't put the SWHID inside the content, because it will, the fact of using a SWHID will change the content. Another question from Christine: should code meta file be also updated through developments? It should be updated as long as the metadata is new metadata. I strongly suggest to have it as easy as possible in terms of don't put too much information that needs to be updated very often. Okay, where there are let's say project in place on how to do this automatically, how to generate a code meta automatically from a code repository. Maybe Sabrina will put you a link. I don't know if she has this link in mind about the auto code meta generator using a GitHub repository to generate a code meta file. Very useful to those of you who have already a code repository on GitHub. And it should be updated as if new authors are coming in, if new keywords should be updated. There's the question of the version, if it's a version kind of, if you have the version in the properties. So yes, the version should be updated. To tell you the truth, I've tried in SoftWare Heritage to put a code meta.json file. It is in one of the modules. It wasn't updated since. So that's kind of an honest take on that. Very hard to get developers to create the metadata. So this is a really big issue and question in general. The code meta, so the code meta.json, for those of you who do not know, it's subset of schema.org, both classes, source code and software application. So this is the question of Christine. Does it distinguish source code and application? You can see in the vocabulary which property was taken from which class. So yes, but I'm not sure that this is used somewhere in terms of use case. So this is a good question that we can investigate, and maybe next week we will announce another fair impact implementation workshop. Depends if we are brave or not for the end of May, because the project is ending at the end of May, and we do want to do something with code meta. Not sure that we will do that through fair impact. Maybe it will be a SoftWare Heritage thing, but I can promise you that code meta needs same session that we have now. We might do something similar for metadata and code meta, because there's so many things to say about metadata. Thank you, Sabrina, for sharing the links about the auto code meta generator. I see that we have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to stop that. I'm going to wait a second to see if other questions are coming in. Very, very nice to see this very lively interactive session with people still here, even though we're less than before. Okay, maybe it's time to get some coffee or tea and cookies. I wish you all a good end of day. I want to really thank you for being active participants and being here. And I hope to see your SWHIDs. Have a good afternoon.